Energy Espresso stands as a captivating gateway, merging the pulsating world of energy innovations with the deeply ingrained culture of coffee. Every episode serves as a fresh brew of ideas, featuring thought-provoking discussions on the latest in energy technologies, sustainability efforts, and the global transition towards greener alternatives. We invite energy experts, innovators, and thought leaders to share their insights and visions for a sustainable future. Energy Espresso is more than just a podcast. It's a community for those passionate about making a difference and those eager to learn more about the energy that powers our world and the coffee that fuels our days. So, join us on this journey and let's discover together the fascinating intersection of energy solutions and coffee culture, one episode at a time. The Energy Espresso Podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors. AMP's diversified contract power generation fleet delivers fully managed power with mobile assets ranging from 35 megawatts through 2.5 megawatts, with the objective to provide a utility-like experience. Contact our team today to learn more. Let's talk power and get amped.
Welcome to the Energy Espresso. My name is Dave Bosco, and I appreciate you joining us today. We're at the Daniel Energy Partners Barbecue in the Permian Basin, and joined today with my co-host, the David de Roode, as well as our guest today, Wes Finch from Crosscut Gas Partners. And, with oil and gas being the energy that moves us and makes the world go round, we usually start the episode off by getting the conversation energized with a cup of brew. And today we've got the Free Reign coffee that is courtesy from a sponsorship here. And David, which coffee did you select?
You know, Dave, I wish I could tell you. I don't remember, but it's good. It's black,
okay,
hot and strong.
I love it.
Same here.
Wes, I got you the American Dirt, and I felt like it's only appropriate. Like I refer to being in the Permian as being in the dirt because this is where business and shit happens. And I think, we want to take a sip and kind of get the conversation energized, and then maybe, you guys tell me what you think about this cup of coffee.
Sounds good.
I think it tastes better if Aaron was here and not in Montreal at the liquor conference, but it's pretty good coffee.
It is good coffee. What do you think, Wes?
It's good. Having coffee in the sun at about noon is it's a great cup of coffee. I'll start sweating here in a second. It'll be great.
Yeah,
I love it. Then
yes.
The electrons are happening in the body.
That's right.
If you guys see me shaking, it's not because I need to drink alcohol and I am having the binges from last night. I'm on my 6th cup, so this is 3 podcasts in a row. So I am highly caffeinated and
Perfect.
Glad to be on this podcast with you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you all for having me. Look forward to the conversation.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
absolutely.
Pleasure.
So, Wes, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to the Permian Basin, and ultimately how you got into the oil and gas business.
Yeah, so grew up in north central Texas in a small town called Holiday, right outside of Wichita Falls. Dad was in medical sales. Mom was a teacher. Didn't know anything about oil and gas. Grew up there, graduated, went to Waco, went to Baylor, was an athletic trainer there. Actually was a trainer when Art Briles and RG3 and everybody was there, so we were on the up years. Met my wife there. She got into the Texas Tech PA program out here on Midland College campus. Essentially a month before we got married, and we said, okay, what are we going to do? Prayed through it. Pretty clear we needed to go out to Midland. I didn't know anything about the oil field, but came out here and was able to get a job with ProPetro, and met back then Dale Redmond, David Sledge, Sam Sledge, and my wife's uncle's a guy named Reese Boudreau who owned Phoenix Lease Services, and ended up saying, okay, how do I need to do this? They said, go get your CDL and learn it from the ground up and see where it goes. So that's what I did, and that was 2013. Got my CDL, drove a truck in the Seaman department over there for a year. Left there, went to a company called Phoenix Lease Services. Did sales, was a sales manager, then was going to become the kind of general manager or whatever. Decided to go and start my own business with a couple partners on the water side. We had bought some surface tracks and started selling water to a couple different operators, and said, hey, I think we're onto something. Went and partnered up with a couple guys. A guy named Mike Black and Reed Taylor. They had a company called Blackline. I came over and partnered with them on to go really grow a water business, water midstream business. They had a little bunch of service assets on the water transfer side in Poly, so it was a good combination. Reed and I are still good friends, but good friends back in the day, and he was partners with me on all the properties, and so we really had a kind of a business goal, and took Blackline. At that point, we were doing everything under Blackline. Took Blackline, grew it to about 600 employees, and really fast, and had a construction business and a water business, and thought we were untouchable, and had some adjustments we had to make along the way, and so downsize. We kind of saw, everybody kept coming up to us and be like, man, I see your trucks everywhere, and I'd get home and tell my wife, like, that scares me, and anyways, ended up getting everybody kind of focused in I would say the Midland Basin. Had a couple crews out in the Delaware Basin, but on the water side, which is really what I was focused on, we said, hey, how do we really go take this from kind of a service business to go take it into more of a midstream business? So about 2016, 2017, we started focusing on water sourcing. Ended up going and building through some SUAs and some infrastructure and some water well fields. Ended up building a really good business that was selling water to several operators in Martin County. Essentially, 2019 hit, or 2019 came. We were trying to raise some capital with a couple private equity guys that were operators, but they were backed by private equity, to partner with them to go take down some of the assets that were on the market. And 2020 hit. We were the leaders in those assets. We had a lot of momentum behind us with infrastructure and kind of vision and goal. And 2020 hit. We decided to still go raise some capital. Needed to clean up the balance sheet a little bit, and so we did that with my two partners, Adam and Ian, and went and raised some just local money around town and kind of passed the hat in Midland, which can go a long ways. And got the water midstream assets pulled out of Flow Point, which is the entity we had at that point that was the water business, over into Commodore with a couple team members. And our goal was really just to focus on, asset heavy, contract, cash flow, and really go build a business. So that was September 30th, 2020. 20 months later, sold those assets to Lagoon Water Midstream, had a really good, successful transaction there. Investors did really well. It was about that time that we started seeing the gas demand in the field increasing, and the solution at that time seemed to be CNG trucks. And I think it was easy to kind of take a diesel truck and convert it to CNG and essentially have savings, but you're still over the road. Mm-hmm. And so we said, hey, why can't we do this with piping? So that was early 2022. We got busy with our transaction. We sold, took a couple months, enjoyed some downtime, and then said we got to get back to work, and we think there's a good opportunity to really go after this Crosscut vision. Had Tyler Smith, who's our co-founder, Ian, our CFO, and Adam Cunhas, who's one of our main capital sponsors and one of the co-founders. Essentially early 23 really started thinking, I'd say, late 22, early 23 really started thinking about what it would look like to build a business around that. So I'll pause there unless you want me to keep going. That's how I got to Midland. That was a long answer to your question.
Well, that's how a lot of folks get to Midland, it seems, and
Yes.
It's a good story. And it seems like you've had a successful entrepreneurial experience, and this is a great environment where folks who are good people, work hard, have a good idea, can make things happen. And I think, the direction you're headed based on where our business is headed as a whole is brilliant. So, Dave, you want to maybe talk about where we kind of screwed that up. We'll have to edit that part out. But talk about where Crosscut is now and what your focus is for 25.
Yeah, and Wes, to expand upon that, like the culture piece of it here in Midland, Odessa, the Permian is a very unique culture compared to any other oil and gas town there is. I love the fact that you guys are able to, as you said, pass the hat around, raise local capital, get folks who are vested in the community to go, there's these white space business opportunities, right? And that's where you and I have talked, at length, kind of going, you're in between the field gas, right? Which most operators, you go, hey, if gas prices are negative, shit, makes sense. Go ahead and use something otherwise have to pay to take away. But the volumes, the pressures, many things are, hurdles to be able to get there. And CNG on the other side that you brought up, it's a good facilitator. You can save money. It's good emissions benefits, but the well-to-wheel emissions, the on-road, over-the-road trucking that still exists, that's a big challenge we have here in the Permian and oil and gas, period. Did you go, you know what, I did this once in water. Gas is big. I see this white space. Was that kind of the thought process and logic to go, we got to be the facilitator to be the third option that's in between the two, for lack of a better term?
I'd like to tell you that I put a lot of thought behind it. Really what happened is after the transaction, when we sold the Commodore assets, it was about 60 days in, and my wife said, you got to get back to work. You're actually affecting my schedule, and you're bugging me, And I said, okay, well, I'm going to get back to it then. And so I came to the office and said, all right, we need to really kind of take a look at this. We saw the demand increasing. Really, there was, a handful of things that we saw. Just, a lot of the people we were talking to on the water side are the same people we talked to on the gas side with operators. Obviously, on the midstream space, it's a little different. But and we just went to them and said, what do you think about this? Here's why we have this thesis. And we went through several iterations. I mean, one thing that I'll always be open about is, I'm an entrepreneur, but that also means it comes with, black eyes and scars and all the things and a lot of lessons learned. And
absolutely,
the season that I went through from, I'd say kind of 2013 to 2019, 2020, kind of prepared me for what it is today. And everything wasn't all roses. And it was something that, I'm glad I went through because it prepared me to be where we are today. And getting to answer your question, I mean, when we looked at the market in general, there was really three ways that people were solving that solution. Operators were spending the capital themselves, you were trucking CNG, or you were treating field gas, that in certain areas or in, big swaths, you're treating field gas. And so as we looked at it and we just looked at just kind of the gaps in each one of those, all of those are going to be needed.
Yes.
Certain operators are going to spend their own capital. Certain areas are going to need to treat their field gas because there's flaring, and that's going to be a really good option for them. Trucking's always going to be there because there's going to be areas where CNG it's going to be the best option.
Sure.
With the consolidation and the opportunity to look at developments in big corridors and big acreage, we thought a solution was infrastructure. And because to relate it to water, because of what we came from and where we came from on the water side, our whole thesis was water distribution. Mm-hmm. We were taking produced water, instead of sending it kind of straight to a disposal, we started the business on the supply side. So we actually took, all of the supply contracts and said, we have, 80 million barrels we're going to sell this year. How much of that can we actually displace with the produced water that we're going to bring in so we can keep water above ground? We took that same thesis and applied it to gas and said, you have gas right now leaving the Permian.
Yep.
When the demand in the Permian is going up.
Yep.
How do we keep the gas in the Permian? And especially with, where Waha is and all the index is right now, I mean, we think it's a great opportunity. And then you see the regulations coming and, to get a line in to support additional takeaway, there's a gap in time there. Yeah. And so I think it allows us to really help the operators think and think, and educate them on kind of with the infrastructure in the Permian, how does that affect your mindset and the way you think about, these pipelines going outside the Permian? And so it started with kind of production and frac and, with the amount of E-fleets coming to market and, the demand that was coming, we said trucks can't keep up with that.
No.
And treating field gas is going to be hard to do, so really it's going to take a lot of capital dollars.
And there's a lot of expertise. I appreciate you saying that, right? Because, look, as a business, you don't ever want to get over your skis, right? And you go, hey, could I get the field gas treatment piece in place? You absolutely can, but risk is a part of any business decision, right? And if you're an operator, you're going, I need takeaway capacity, right? Offtake, get into market. That investment, the risk that comes with that, you then have to live with the fact if you made a poor decision on picking one technology or a process to be able to treat that field gas, you got to own it at that point, right? So I love David. Something that I'm interested in is like the nuts and bolts, right? Because look, we got folks that on both of our podcasts maybe aren't technical people, don't understand like the infrastructure piece of it. And if somebody's listening to this, Wes, like I'd be asking myself, okay, so you're going to be an extension of the midstream, for lack of a better term, right? How does that work? Like walk us through kind of like a topology on how do you get gas from a major trunk, for lack of a better term, to the location? And I almost am interested in how does that work for an e-frac application that moves every 14 to 30 days? That's a lot of transient that ends up happening. And then how does that work for a production application or other tangential, areas that would need gas to be delivered on site?
I mean, our business is really built around trying to stay focused. I learned that, going back to the previous companies, you can't be all things to all people. And I think that we learned that we have a certain value that we want to bring. We think infrastructure is that. What the gas is used for, we're a base load business. So what the gas is used for, it affects, the operations of it. But to get down to the nuts and bolts, to use your words, is we're going to hook up to a pipeline post the processing plant. So you have your GMPs, which we spent a ton of time early on, probably the first 6 to 8 months, really trying to meet with every GMP and say, here's our business thesis. When we're making a phone call to you guys, we're not competing. We're not doing any gathering and processing. We're actually trying to hook up and take residue gas off your lines as quick as we can so it frees up capacity, for you guys to add other gas in the line. Once we started flowing gas off of several, midstream GMPs, it really started clicking, and they were able to say, okay, this makes sense. Hey, how can you take more gas? But the thesis was, we're going to go lay permanent infrastructure. Where it started was really on the production side, because you have compressors out there that are running off of wet gas, so high BTU gas, which usually means you're burning the NGLs, which are a revenue stream. And so between that, you have the power generation side. So when you think about the power generation side, I'm going to bucket that into microgrids, drilling rigs, completion, everything like across the board. That demand was going up because there was so much issues with the grid and keeping up with the grid. And so when we saw that, it was, okay, we're going to lay this permanent infrastructure, let's call it a trunk line, into the field. And then to really service the frac locations, we call it our last mile. So we're going to then go lay pipe above ground to go last mile to the frac, and you're going to roll it up, roll it out, service the frac, roll it back up. Reason you can do that is because most of the time you're delivering that. If it's a dual fuel, it's 200 psi. If it's an E-fleet, it's somewhere between 600 to 700 psi. And we're not going to transfer above ground at high pressure very long, just because that makes all of us nervous. But we're going to we have the right protocols in place and safety SOPs and everything we need to really deliver it, even if we're servicing an E-fleet, deliver it at a high pressure and be safe with the way that we design our last mile infrastructure. So we're going to hook up. We're going to work with the midstream groups on interconnect. We're going to buy the gas off of them, deliver it all the way over to the location, whatever delivery points operators want us to deliver to, and then we're going to charge them a per MMBTU charge, fee for that, kind of based on volume and term and all the different functions and production, completion. Everybody's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And so it's unique because from a third-party perspective, operators have been doing this for years.
Sure.
And operators have, had been forced to spend capital on residue lines. You have all your big operators that have, their own processing plants. They did that just to help make sure their gas was moving. They have their own residue lines. They're connected and partnered with all these other guys. So operators have been doing this for a long time. I think one of the things when we've come in and talked to them and said, hey, let us go spend the capital on this next pipeline, they've said, I didn't even realize that was an option because there hadn't been a third party, because your GMPs really are trying to take the gas, gather it, go spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to build a facility to then get it out.
Yep.
And, depending on the contract, sometimes they have title, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't take title till, it's post the processing plant. I mean, it's all different, and it depends on if it's an old agreement or a new agreement. And so because of that, there's a lot of complexities on with the operator on why they ended up wanting to spend their own money. Now that we can come in and say, let us do that, we've gotten a lot of feedback on, oh, that actually makes sense. If you can go spend this money so it allows me to go drill 2 more wells next year to make sure my production numbers are getting hit, we'd love to do that because ultimately we're trying to get to the same price. And with all the consolidation, most of these bigger companies, they have their own project team, which has their own capital budget, which has to justify their spend. And so it's not like they're not charging internal charges. I mean, they have to really justify, I'm going to go spend this $20 million, $50 million. Well, then I got to charge drilling, completion, production, something for us spending these dollars. And so I think because of that, we can be pretty competitive. Plus, we can just move faster. I mean, we wake up every day and live and breathe this, whereas an operator has 15 other projects on their plate and an engineer's trying to figure out all the other components that he's working on. We wake up and breathe this project execution.
The different areas that you can supply gas, whether it be supporting production, drilling, completions activities, or even power generation, where are you seeing the most interest and uptick in y'all's call for y'all's services?
I would say it's really dependent on the operator. I would say it's easy to justify or think about cost when you're comparing, let's just say, power generation. So power generation, again, we're bucketing drilling, completion, and then like a microgrid or a temporary power generator out there for 6 months, a year, whatever it is. Because your 2 options there, or at least the stuff that we feel like we're kind of competing against, is treating field gas or trucked CNG. Well, when you look at volume over a certain amount of term, and you can add drilling and completion and then a generator sitting there, it might be low volume, but it's volume over potentially 365 days, you can really get to a price that helps make sense and helps completion and drilling save money, and then ultimately it helps your power cost be competitive, almost to where they're starting to think like, should we just put in our own little mini grid and actually have this going for 3+ years?
Yep. Yeah.
And a lot of that is just, when you think about the cost of power and you think about the cost of, your temporary power, one of your biggest costs is fuel.
Yep.
And so when we can help lower that by taking a holistic approach while also saving the drilling and completions money, it's a win-win-win. And, everybody that we, have talked to and are working on projects with seem to be excited about it. That's not all of them. I mean, if you only have 20 wells over here in a certain area and you're going to go hit these fracs, and maybe those are on ESP and there's no compressors and they have electric already, like that might not be a great project for us. But when, especially with all the consolidation, when you have these big projects that electricity is delayed, any of the utilities are delayed, you end up having, most of these kind of big developments, 24 well, developments, and then they move off and they come back. You see that as a big benefit just because it's, we're a base load business. I mean, more volume, the better we can be.
Yeah.
Now, there's a commitment there, right? I mean, we got to still go spend quite a bit of money to get that in. The taps with the midstream groups are not cheap. There's a lot of, nuances there, and who has title and who are we doing the agreement with to connect to the pipeline versus the transaction with the gas, and what pipeline are we talking about, and is it interstate or intrastate, and are they in different regulation classes? And so we've had to spend quite a bit of time making sure we're within all the boundaries, and we have great attorneys and great engineers that have kind of put the money in, or put the time and the money in to really kind of make sure we're checking all those boxes.
Sure. Are you all doing the hot tapping yourself, or are you third partying that out, or?
Well, so most of the midstreams are going to hot tap themselves.
Yeah.
But we're most of the time we're going to be trying to build the manifold connection so that we have our design there. Just because of Railroad Commission and some of them FERC regulated, we got to get approval and make sure that they're agreeing with that. Or sometimes they might want to do their own manifold, and then we'll hook ours up to theirs, just depending on how many kind of outlets we want, etc. But that's all. The taps and the hot taps are all on them.
Yeah.
Meaning the GMP midstream or the long haul pipelines.
Sure. Well, one of the things you said that I love hearing, because I preach it a lot to folks as well, is the power of focus. And I know you guys are largely focused on the Permian, but when you and I were talking the other day, sounds like you've got some interest from other parties outside the basin. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the
exploratory things y'all are doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that's been interesting about this business and why I'm really excited about it is it's very duplicative in really several different oil and gas developments, but also into different industries. I mean, when you think about the amount of gas that's needed, I mean, every house has gas to it, every building has gas to it, most of them do. All your big developments usually have a gas tap, and I think that when we think about kind of the opportunity and the growth for this, we're going to stay focused on the Permian today, but we're definitely getting a bunch of phone calls, whether it's help with a data center, whether it's operators going, hey, we have assets up here in the Utica. Could you come help us think about that? And that's a different landscape, but the business model is going to be the same. Trucking might be, CNG trucking might be more expensive. The landowner dynamic might be a little bit more, just because in certain areas you have big landowners. So sometimes that's good, sometimes that's a little bit more challenging. But we're definitely getting a lot of phone calls about kind of taking this and looking at projects outside of that. I think that's for us to really focus on that. And other than South Texas, I would say kind of outside the Permian or South Texas. We're going to try to stay really focused on building, a stable business and, where we want to make sure we're solving the right solutions, here and potentially in South Texas before, we're probably 24 months away before we'd start really looking outside of that, unless somebody brings a big project, I'm not going to say no, but outside the Permian comes with team and, culture is really important to me. And, our office is something we take big pride in. I mean, almost 75% of our office is here today because they love these type of events. I love them being at these type of events just because you get a chance to build camaraderie and and I think that's important. And as
that's huge.
As you continue to get outside of one office culture, it just changes the dynamic and how you need to manage the business. And we're gonna try to protect that as much as we can.
I got to imagine some of the larger midstream companies that have long haul pipe, et cetera, that you're talking about, have got to appreciate y'all's service relative to, these projects that you can help distribute gas to, given that, these projects are not going to, from the way they're looking at capital spending and capital projects, they're not going to get involved in themselves. So you're really filling that void that is becoming a necessary void to fill. So
one of the things, I mean, it was surprising to me, but it was also it was some good affirmation when we were talking to the different midstream groups and the long haul guys and the GMPs, and we were talking about the business plan. They were like, hey, that's great because we get requests all the time for gas lift or compressors or whatever it is, but that takes a really big OFS mindset and a really big field presence to make sure that you're out in the field every day. You have the right optimization, automation, control valves, everything. And when those projects, that they're looking at are, call it somewhere between $5 and $20 million, they're kind of going, well, should we go focus on that or should we go focus on this couple $100 million deal that's going to add revenue to the business? And so when we came and said we can help fill this gap, they were like, that's great. And I said the reason why we believe we're a great partner for you guys is because we have a midstream mindset, which is just distribution and volume and base load and trying to get it to service as many things as it can. We have a very great understanding of land. I mean, coming from the water side, we also personally own a ton of land across the Permian Basin and manage a lot of land. We understand what landowners want. We understand kind of what their needs are, how they think. And we have we were managing, I think, 40,000 acres of surface before selling the Commodore assets. We dealt with, I think we added it up right before we sold them. It was 60-something landowners. There's not a landowner out in the Permian specifically. I'm not going to say New Mexico, but let's call it the Permian, Texas, that we're not one or two phone calls away if we don't know them. And I think because of that, that's a big deal. And we try to keep most of all of our land stuff in-house because I think that, I want to wake up next to our VP of land or any of our, landmen and say, if it's Saturday morning, we're going to get out there and go meet with this landowner because it's just as important that we came out on a Saturday that it is that we need to make sure this is a timely done. So you got midstream land, then you have the OFS side. I mean, all of our managements come from OFS, understand what it takes to make sure we're providing a good service, communication, constantly checking in. And I think because of the combination of those three, all the midstream guys have been very responsive and saying, like, that makes sense. And we'd actually prefer to hand some of these projects to you guys versus us to try to do this ourselves, because that's not how they're built.
So is most of your project coordination, is it with the operators, or are you doing is there any collaboration with any service companies that would be big utilizers of having the gas at the location?
I would say from we're coordinating with everybody. I mean, we're actually having, we were at lunch with a CNG truck provider last week, trying to figure out how as we have pipelines in, can they put a terminal for, on our line to help get them closer to, certain areas. We've been talking to power generation folks to try to figure out how they have projects, and they're telling us their biggest cost is fuel. How can we help reduce that? We've talked to tons of different frac companies, and they're trying to figure out how, we can work together on certain projects in certain areas to where it helps them, become more efficient, because on all the fracs that we've had, we've been able to help increase substitution rates. Our gas is extremely clean. It's at a very, I'll say the variable and change of our gas is very minimal, because we're getting it from the same pipeline. We're getting a stream, a very consistent flow at the very consistent pressure. And so we're just seeing a lot of efficiencies on the completion side and on the compression side, just because of those two factors.
Yep.
And so we're willing to talk to everybody. I mean, one thing I learned in the water space is, even though they're competitors, sometimes you just need to go have a coffee with them and say, hey, I know we might be competing on this stuff, but how's there ways to work together? Because there's not one person's going to solve everything, and Crosscut's not going to be able to solve everything. And some projects are going to make sense and some aren't. And
you can't box yourself in. Right.
No.
I mean, that's one thing that I think the, business model of kind of isolating and having this siloed approach it's not right. You got to collaborate, even if it's with competitors, right? Sometime down the road, somebody's going to need somebody else. And there may be additional capacity that they don't have that you guys can facilitate. And something I love is that, when I'm hearing you talk, Wes, you're a service business, right? Like, that's what you guys are. You are providing a service, and service sells, and that's why people choose a partner to have that, lack of a better term, one throat to choke, to go, you know what? I'm signed up for this. You're going to deliver me this expectation, and you guys willing to get out, as leadership on a Saturday to go and meet with the customer, that speaks volumes to somebody, right? Especially a big E&P. Is that something that you guys kind of like take that more service provider approach than just like, hey, we're giving you molecules?
Yeah, I'm gonna say correct you, because that's not the right word, but let me just clarify one thing there.
Sure.
I think we see ourselves as a fuel gas midstream distribution company. I think because of where we've come from and because of our resumes, we have a very servant leader mentality, which has a very important. Whereas the OFS mindset, the servant, being a servant to understanding you are providing a service. We're providing a molecule, but we're providing a quality of service. And when somebody asks us, hey, can you do this? Whether it's in the four corners of a document that I signed or not, I got to go see these guys at church and lunch and, events like this. And I want them to walk up to me and say, hey, man, thanks for getting me out of a bind. Not look at me, give me, say, dadgummit, I don't want to go talk to that guy.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we take it very serious, and when we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it. We're going to do it right, and we're going to be servant leaders about it. And we're going to make sure that, hey, if we mess up, we're going to be honest about it. And if we can execute, we're going to. There's been probably 5 different projects that we've had opportunities to go do, and I could have said yes. I called the operators and said, listen, if we take this right now just because of time, it puts us at a risk of failing. And if this is the first project for you, I'm not going to take that risk.
Yeah.
And I think we earned some respect there, just because. You can get in a mentality of, I'm going to go grow and I'm going to try to go do this just because I want it. We're not going to do that. I've done that in the past. Okay, so
get over your skis.
I've done that in the past, and sometimes it's worked out and sometimes it hasn't. I think for this business, because the molecule that we're moving, we need to make sure we're safe. We need to make sure that we're not last minute. We need to make sure that we're timely in everything that we're doing. And the project scope is very well defined between us and whoever our customer is, whether that's a frac provider, working with CNG, power generation, or the operator, on the production side.
The power piece David, you brought it up initially with the power focus, right? And you brought up power generation a couple of times. Obviously, that being the market, I'm focused on, and Wes, we've had the pleasure to work together as partners with some of our partners. That is a space that I think is absolutely phenomenal. You brought up the data center opportunities, right? It's beautiful hearing a lot of these Silicon Valley, we want green energy, we want wind, solar, renewables, capitulate very quickly when that can't be delivered, and they're embracing natural gas. And where we previously said, like, oh, you're going to have peak oil, peak carbon usage or carbon-based fuels usage, we just keep on stretching out the need for oil and gas long term. There's a lot of demand in the Permian, huge amount. If you look at power generation numbers, just on the West Texas side, by 2038, it's 26 gigawatts to 28 gigawatts. It's about a 9 to 11 gigawatt market. New Mexico side, it's probably another 13 to 18 gigawatts by that time. Data center market, huge, right? Those partners that you're talking with, what is their temperature? Are they saying, you know what, I'm going to have electricity, so I only need natural gas for a year or two? Are they having more constructive long-term conversations to go, how do we firm up the fuel to be able to enable us to have our, essentially backstop to the utility, not doing what they're supposed to do from a utility perspective? Are these like longer-term contract opportunities you're talking about, or are they just kind of short as a bridge?
Yeah, so...
and obviously if there's stuff that you can't share because, market intel, things of that, very respectful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say on the power side, so if you look at the cleanest source of power, it's electricity. Behind that is essentially natural gas. Let's say electricity, the utility.
Yep.
Then you have kind of wind, solar, all that stuff. I kind of bucket all that in the utility power,
yep,
whether it's coming from, wherever it's coming from. Then you have residue gas. So I think one of the things that we have to be cognizant of is, where does ESG play as we're having conversations with our customers? There's certain customers that ESG, the emissions component, the footprint component is a very important piece, because that's how they get graded. Others are saying, hey, that is important, but if this can help us save costs, we need to do it.
Yep.
And so when we've taken the approach, and why I love the Crosscut business model, is because if we can help save money first, or by replacing wet gas on compressors and getting the NGLs to the market, so that we're making producers money, and then there's a big ESG component, then great.
Yeah.
Versus
that's upside.
Versus leading in with ESG. Now, there's we've had several operators tell us if we can replace wet gas on compressor and take residue gas, that's a 50% reduction in your
VOCs.
Yes,
and, yeah,
all of it.
Absolutely.
Same thing on the power generation side. So to answer your question directly, I think what we've seen is, with the amount of data centers, Bitcoin, honestly, even just people needing to put microgrids in themselves, whether that's a third party like a high volt or a operator doing it themselves, the demand is just increasing, specifically because of the activity and the lack of the utility being able to keep up.
Yeah.
Well, when you actually start thinking about it long term, and you have, let's just call it a couple 100 megawatt, data center coming in, or you have, a co-op over here. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but some operators trying to get together, or a third party getting together to go build this kind of microgrid out. That increased demand it has to be looked at long term.
Yeah.
You're going to spend so much money on the power generation side that when you start looking at it 3, 4 or 5 plus years, you actually become pretty competitive with the electric, your price for electricity. Once you start adding your T&D charges and all,
yep,
you actually add it all up, you actually can be pretty competitive. And you also can take, your capital infrastructure costs and take it out over the molecules that you're going to be providing over those long term. So, it's just a function of kind of price and commitment, and who's willing to think about it for 1 or 2 years, and what does it look like over 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
And you can't ever forecast. I'd kind of say after 3 years, really after 2 years, it's kind of like, what does this look like? Like, here's my assumptions.
Yeah.
We always try to be, when asking about the contracts. Obviously, I can't share a bunch of details, but we try to be as flexible as we can to be a good partner, because the last thing I want is 4 years down the road, 5 years, 7 years, whatever it is, when we come to a renewal term, somebody go, well, I like this, price is right, but these guys have been hard to deal with because of, whatever the contract says.
Yeah.
My attorney's going to tell me, hey, we got to make sure we're doing it right and document and doing everything we need to. But there's also a component of making sure that, this goes back to the service side, when we're thinking about this long term, we can get to the price, but price it and everything, and quality of service they're going to really grade us on.
Yep.
Safety, all the other components of it. So, we see it, to answer your question directly, we see the longer you can think about power as a more of a temporary, not temporary, meaning kind of post this 6 months, year, even 2 years.
Yep.
And think about it a lot longer term, the more beneficial we can be to you from an economics perspective.
I like it, man.
Yeah.
And there's a big thing to be said about doing the next right thing by a customer, right? Because, to your point about, hey, look, contract says something, but at the end of the day, what's right? And how do you manage that relationship piece of it? I appreciate you guys take that approach.
Well, we're going to see everybody that we're doing business with at stuff like this, and so I'm going to make sure that when we see them, they want to come over to the tent and have a drink and some food, and we can sit there and laugh and talk about kids and family and all the other stuff. And work's the last thing we want to talk about, because they trust us.
Yep.
And so I think we've been able to do that. I believe we did that on the water side. We're going to do that on the gas side. We've already seen some relationships that have turned into friendships, and I think that's the way for us. As we think about and the executives talk about it, you got to get to that spot so that you earn the trust, so that if they need to tell you something and they need to tell you to straighten up, they know they have the freedom to do that. Yep. And they can do it as bluntly as they need to, because I prefer them just to be straightforward.
I think the reality is, though, too, best intention to contract and put the right language in there that everybody agrees, but my experience has been, you can't think of everything, and there's going to be things that pop up that I like to go back and, if you've got a good relationship there, and go, what was really the intent of this in the first place?
That's right.
This was our intent. We're going to stand behind it, and you have that discretion. And unfortunately, not everybody takes that approach.
Yep.
But I think having an awareness of that is good. I think long term, because there are some disputes that had there been some better relationships there with those parties, might have kept temperatures down and come to a reasonable commercial agreement on where you go next. So
I think you said it.
Important.
I think you said it yesterday to me, and I completely agree. It takes years to build a relationship and build a reputation. It takes one wrong decision to lose it.
Yeah.
And I think this industry is one that we've all seen that. We've all seen that in colleagues or friends or people out that's happened to, and we're I'm going to strive every day to wake up and make sure that that's not we're always going to do what's right, and we're not going to solve everything. We're going to time kills all deals is what I say, and you're not going to solve it, but at the end I always tell the customers, you're either going to have to trust me that if we figure out something that we don't we didn't have in the document, that we're going to work it out, whether it's an amendment or we're going to figure out what we need to do. And we've been able to have success with that, and I think we will continue to do that just because of our approach to the conversations and relationships.
Yeah. So Wes, you talked about the trials and tribulations of entrepreneurship, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I think that's great. If one of the things I like to ask guests when we have them on, and those who have had some very interesting experiences you've had, is there anything that you've learned that you would have liked to have told your younger self, so that you might have avoided a situation, or any words of wisdom or advice that you might like to share with some of our listeners that tuning in to hear our conversation with you today?
Yeah, I have a long list. We probably don't have enough time to go through all of it, but I think the top couple things is, I I grew up, my mom and dad were both entrepreneurs in their own ways. Going through college, I always read these leadership books and, how do I go grow a business book and, Shoe Dog, all those. And you kind of have this perception of what it's supposed to be like. And I want to go, grow a business and have these employees and do all this stuff. I think, at the age of 24, when I came out here and jumped into this, reading these books, thinking like, okay, yeah, like I got this. This should be easy. You jump into it, and I think the biggest thing that I wish I would have told, what I know now is, always know the numbers, trust the people you work with, and, make sure you have clarity at, your partners need to actually fundamentally have a lot of the same thesis that you do. Work ethic, make sure that, you have the right work ethic and that they have the same work ethic. I'd say, let me think about that. I had a good one, I just lost it.
I think always know the numbers is a good one that a lot of people lose sight of. You mentioned, we were talking about that the other day. I think some people, they focus on the inflow, and that's good, but it does make sense to focus on the outflow too sometimes. It's not always about top line revenue. Are you making money?
That's right. And I think that the biggest thing for us, I think why we had success, learned this through the Black Line Flow Point stuff. We review our financials every week. We have projections. We know if I was to email our COO at, our water business or our VP of Ops at Crosscut, if I emailed him today, he'd, within the next couple hours, he'd be able to say exactly how much EBITDA we had yesterday. We have goals set. Our team is, and the way we incentivize them is based on everybody rowing in the same direction. You don't have ops different incentive than sales, different incentive than accounting or safety or anybody. We have everybody's rowing in the same direction. Now you have different discretionary stuff, but I think aligning that and being transparent on it. Everybody has a story where they got promised, the moon, and if they came in, they'd get this big paycheck whenever something happened. Then all of a sudden it was voodoo behind the scenes. You could never tell like what I'm getting, what I'm not getting. We've taken the approach and like be transparent about it. If you award somebody, the sweat equity or B units or whatever you call them, like they need to know how to calculate it.
Yep.
Because I want them to wake up every morning and be able to, say, okay, here's where we're at today. That's right. And so I think that specifically has, has been something we've seen success with. And then really, managing people is hard. Knowing your skill set and making sure that you're in that lane. I'm definitely a visionary. I'm a strategy guy. I'm a BD at heart, and I think that I had originally taken the approach like, well, that's just who I am. So then I'm gonna do that, and I'm not gonna focus on details or numbers or do that because this other guy's telling me he's doing it.
Yep.
No. If I was telling the one thing to my younger self is, hey, I took a test when I was 24, 25, and it told me that, and I let that describe who I was as almost an excuse of not doing something else. And once I learned that, my wife's the one that actually said, like, hey, that's not defining you. It was a test that told you something about how you operate. And it was like, dadgum, you're right. And so once I learned that, hey, I can, that's how I operate the grid. I love people. I love relationships. I love, essentially the deal. I love all that stuff, which really means I need to be close to all of those in any business that I'm doing. And I need to essentially surround myself with guys that are very high follow through, very good detail, very good accounting wise, like tracking numbers. We're looking at costs, all this stuff. And we have a great team. We had a great team at Commodore. We have a great team at Crosscut that we've really been able to mold, and everybody kind of work in their lanes, but like rowing everything together. That was probably one of the biggest things that I learned that was hard. And when guys aren't doing that, you got to make adjustments.
Yeah.
And not mixing it as an excuse of what, I'm just going to go sell stuff. No, if I'm the CEO, I got to be able to sell stuff and keep accounting, everybody accountable across their disciplines.
Yeah, you got to be the chief cook and bottle washer.
That's right.
Know how to take the trash out, know how things are done, and I applaud you for that because I think one of the things that we've seen in this industry where you certainly see a lot of turnover. I think, some elements of that is you're going to have, but a lot of that transparency you speak of is not there. And I think, providing that transparency does a lot for, building trust and keeping people believing in what it is that you're doing. And when you don't have that, it's just so much easier for them to go think about something else or hell, even maybe go try to compete against you.
Yeah.
So,
something else I love, David, that Wes is describing, and as he's kind of explaining his what he's learned throughout his career, right? And this is something that when I was a early 20-something-year-old, you kind of have this like attitude of everything, right? And you learn really quickly as you mature, not only as a man or an adult, but in business as well, that you have these growth opportunities. And I know in my career and life, you kind of have these milestones that you look back and go, that's where the shift happened, right? And I was like, you know what? I know I need to kind of implement this next stage as a leader and getting to – that's something I love about – that I think is beautiful about the human condition and the human story is people continuously, even as you grow into old age, one of my rules of life is if you're not learning something today, you're failing, right? And learning something about yourself and always having that continuous improvement, I think that's brilliant, man. I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that stuff too.
Yeah, I got a good story. I don't know how much time we have left, but so Dale Redmond.
Yeah, love Dale.
So I came out to Midland and met with Dale, took me down to a Mexican restaurant, Son of a Guns, down off south of I-20.
Yeah,
Manuel's. Yeah, Manuel's.
Yeah, got to get the son of a gun. You
That's
got to be ready to go put that to work later.
That's right. That's right. And I ended up going. He said, "Listen, know your work ethic because you were a trainer. We'll give you a chance. Know you're aggressive. Know you're an ambitious young 24-year-old. I definitely was the guy that was like, I got this. I've read 10 different leadership books. Like, I'm going to figure this out."
Same.
And I'd walk into his office probably, I was there for a year. I probably walked in his office every 6 weeks. I'd text him, I was just, whatever, I was frustrated or needed to, talk about something. I'd walk in and I'd walk out and I was like, I think Dale just chewed my ass out, encouraged me, and then kicked me out of his office. And I don't know if I should feel bad about this or I feel like, all right, I'm going to get back out there and go. And I had to tell Dale, this was probably 3 years ago. I said, after I'd left and we did the Commodore deal, whatever, or maybe it was before it, I walked up to Dale and I said, Dale, I can't thank you enough because I was an arrogant, ambitious young guy that thought I knew what I didn't know, and you kept putting up with me, and you were right. And I said, I don't know if you ever expected me to come back and tell you this, but I wanted to make sure you heard it from my mouth. I thought I knew what I knew at 24, and I didn't know anything. And now that I've got black eyes and, gotten worked through it, I can sit back and say thanks for putting up with me and, thanks for believing in me, too, because he was always a guy pushing me to go do something,
Yeah, invest in the time, right? I mean, that's something that I know as leaders you end up learning, you got to take that time to invest in your team and talent that you see high potential in, right? And go what does this person need to have that next critical mass moment where they go, bam, here's that mental shift to go ahead and go, you know what? I take what that man said to heart, and here's what I need to do as a person.
Yeah, one of the things that always impressed me about Dale is kind of like Teddy Collins. He'd return a phone call every day.
That's right.
And provided he talked to anybody, and definitely respect that. So.
Well, and one thing I like, last thing here, Midland, Texas, is very unique because of the generation that's been here longer than I have, and their willingness to invest in the next generation. And I think that I can name numerous people in my journey over the last 15 years being here that had an impact in me taking the next step and connecting me to the next person. And I think being an entrepreneur here, knowing how to essentially, figure out the resources that you need to kind of take the next step, that is very unique here in Midland. And you're a coffee, a text away from running 5 minutes down to get a coffee and meeting with the guy that has some wisdom to share with you. I've seen that personally in my life, like guys that are willing to do that. And I hope that, as I get to where people see that in me, I can invest in that too. Yeah. So
pay it forward.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what's so neat about Midland. Anybody that's going to do that, they've been where you've been, and it's good to see them do that, because that's what makes the world go round. So
that's right.
We really appreciate you sharing your story with us today, and I think you're on to something in Crosscut, and wish you greatest success.
Thank you. Well, thank y'all for having me on today. I really enjoyed it.
Wes, David, thank you so much for joining the Energy Espresso in this collaboration opportunity today. Folks, we're at the Permian Basin Daniel Energy Partners Barbecue out here in the Permian. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Energy Espresso. My name is Dave Bosco. Got David de Roode with me, as well as Wes Finch, and appreciate you joining us today.